this. Anyone have any questions as they during it, then just type it in the chat box and we'll come to it. But for the moment, I'd like to introduce you to Oliver and thank Oliver for being here this evening. And over to you, Oliver. Thank you.
Thanks very much, John, and just want to say welcome to everybody for joining in this evening. I'd like to thank you for being here, and I'd also like to thank the organisers of the webinar series for inviting me to chat to you this evening. I think the 8-week series, it's a great idea in the current climate, and I tuned in last week to Owen Toohey's webinar. It was very good, and just looking at what you've lined up for the remaining 6 weeks, there's a great program, so well done to the organisers. As John said, I'm a member of the National Officer Development Committee, and our remit really when we started off was to provide support and training for specifically club officers. And during our time, we have built on that, where we would have started off organising training for, we'll say, the principal officers, chairperson, secretary, treasurer, PRO, that we have added to our collection of courses. And Owen Toohey would have outlined some of these courses last week to you. The volunteer recruitment and retention module is one of those courses on offer for officers. And this module works very well in a face-to-face setting, because you get great feedback from people who are there. They share with others what works well in their club, different initiatives that increase the number of volunteers in their club. And even John mentioned, I presented sort of a brief version of this module at your club forum last November, and there was great participation and ideas. But look, even in this setting where it's online, hopefully you'll pick up one or two things from this evening that you'll be able to take away. And really, with any of the webinars, I think that the objective really is, if you get something, it might be one idea or something that will make you reflect on your current practices as a club. So yeah, we're going to, just to give you an outline, we're first of all just going to look briefly at why do people volunteer, and I suppose what goes with that too is, why are people slow to volunteer? Then we're going to look at a culture that promotes volunteerism. In other words, what does a club that encourages volunteerism look like? And as we go through those points, you might think, as we put up each point, just think of your own club and sort of reflect on, well, how well do we do that? Then we're going to look at, I suppose, how we recruit people, and we'll consider that for a while. And then when we do have volunteers on board, the importance of not forgetting about them, that you have to look after them and develop them, give them opportunities. And I suppose that leads on to the next point then, that when you do get people involved in helping out in your club, that we want to hold on to them. And we'll finish up then, as John said, we had 6 questions submitted during the week, and we'll have a look at those as well. So our first section there is, why would someone volunteer or not volunteer? And just for a moment, if you think yourself, how you got involved, like naturally you're involved in the your local handball club, and just think of, well, how did you get involved initially? Maybe think of some of the other activities that you're a volunteer in. How did you get involved in those activities? So one of the first reasons, and I think myself about reasons why I volunteer for certain things, and this one usually is top of the list because they were asked. And I'm here this evening presenting this webinar because Pádraig got in contact a few weeks ago and he asked me. So it might seem you're stating the obvious there, but as we'll see, that some people and a lot of people need to be asked to get involved. A lot of us would probably identify with family tradition as well, that perhaps our parents or members of family were involved in the GAA and just we fell into it as part of a tradition. For people that move to a new area, the GAA is a great opportunity to actually integrate into their new surroundings and to get to know people. Something to do. I know we lead busy lives, but this is something very positive to get involved, whether it's the handball club, the hurling club, the football side of things, that it's a positive thing. Make friends, the social side of it. I suppose that's linked to getting involved in a new community, that it's a great way to, and again, if we think of our own circumstances, I'm sure some of our best friends we met through the local club. It supports career, that people they see it as something very positive to include in a CV or a job application, that they're involved in their local club, whether it's in an administrative capacity or coaching or in whatever role it is, that it's a positive thing to be able to say. Supports children's involvement. That's another reason why people get involved, that they're already coming down to the club with their children and they're quite happy then to give time, to give something back after perhaps a long playing career, that they feel that, you know, they were well looked after by the club for many years and that they would like to give something back to the club. And as we mentioned already, been involved with the GAA club is been associated with something positive. And if you think of our communities, that you know, the GAA club is very central to a lot that happens in the community, whether it's for happy occasions, sad occasions, they're always there to support and lend a hand. So then the reasons for, as I said, it's important to look at the reasons why people are slow to get involved or don't get involved at all. And the first one there is they weren't asked. And I'm not surprised by that one, that, you know, some people don't need to be asked. They would be very, you know, they'd kind of confident enough to go up and say, look, I would like to get involved in something, while other people, they feel that they don't want to be pushy and they can be slow to put themselves forward. So that's really one of the main reasons why people don't volunteer. Now, I have a little asterisk beside this one: don't have required skills. What you really, I mean by that is they think they don't have the required skills. That you ask somebody, you know, would they think of getting involved in, and sometimes you'll get the answer, oh sure, I wouldn't know much about that, or I wouldn't have the skills to do that. And if we think about ourselves, and I'm speaking personally, that I've got involved in things where I would have been hesitant in that because of that I would have thought, well, I don't know whether I'd have much to offer here. So that's often a reason that comes up, is they don't think that they have the skills to get involved in the area that they're being asked. This is another one. Once it starts, it won't stop. And sometimes when we're asked to get involved in something, what's running through our mind is, I wonder how much time this is going to involve. So I'll be touching on this in a later slide about the importance of being very specific in what somebody is being asked to do. And no confidence is linked to that second point, that people often feel that they wouldn't be good enough to get involved or to do the job right. They don't know how to get involved. Again, as linked back to the first one, that they weren't asked, that you have people who are willing, but they don't know how they might be able to get involved. And then clubs don't sell the positives of it, that and we'll be looking at this one too, that the importance of highlighting to people that, you know, been involved in your club, not just been a member, but actually been actively involved, that you get great satisfaction. The reward is in the satisfaction you get out of it. So those two slides there, the reasons for volunteering and not volunteering. Don't take anything for granted. You know, that I think the key thing there is that you know, as a committee or as a club officer, that if you want to get people involved in your club, they have to be asked. So with this here, we're going to look at what does a club that promotes volunteerism look like? And as we go down through each of the characteristics or traits, I'd like you to think about your own club and how many of these traits or characteristics does your club have? And, you know, it would be a worthwhile exercise as a club committee, the executive, that from time to time, maybe at the start when a new committee takes over after an AGM, that, you know, when you're looking at your goals or targets or objectives for the year, that to look at some of these traits and see, you know, how well do we do on these? So the first one there, energy and enthusiasm. Nothing will attract people more than a place that has a bit of a buzz and is full of people keen to work and to get involved. Well managed and safe, and especially for children, a safe environment. A good image and reputation in the locality, because people, you know, people talk about clubs, the local clubs, and it's important that our club, you know, has a good standing in the community, and how you work on building and maintaining your good image and reputation. Welcoming. I often think a little exercise that if somebody new walked into your club grounds, that would they get a feeling of a welcome? Active and interesting. It's linked to the first point there. Positive in its outlook and forward thinking, that even if the club is in a good place at the moment and has, you know, that the club is always looking to the future to not just maintain its current positive position, but also looking to see, well, what, you know, what can we build on next year? Whether it's in the area of increasing the number of people involved in coaching or the social aspect of the club, or in terms of infrastructure. So never standing still. Fair to everybody, and the word I could put in beside that too is respect, that people, whether they're on a committee or ordinary club members, that their opinions are sought and respected, and that it's probably one of the most important traits or characteristics is fairness. Well organised, where people's time is productive, and that word productive, we'll be touching on that when we're looking at how you keep people involved in your club, is that, you know, if people see that there are results to what they're doing in a club, whether it's in terms of administration, coaching, that will keep them involved. It's one of the questions that comes up, is how do we keep people involved in our club? And again, a vibrant and successful organisation. And that word vibrant is like energetic, enthusiastic. Successful, and successful isn't measured in terms of, we say, county titles, or I would look on those as being a bonus. That success can sometimes be measured in terms of the number of people involved in your club, number of new people that came on board, and the numbers playing the game. So success is different from club to club. So I suppose we're coming to how can you recruit volunteers? And as I said at the outset, usually we would throw this one out to the floor, and it's always very interesting to hear what different clubs do. Some of the suggestions I have, as I said, they're nothing I present to you tonight is sort of a definitive list, or that this is the way things have to be done or should be done. They're only suggestions we've picked up from previous seminars. So I'm going to start actually with down in the right corner there with Club Open Day. That's a popular choice by clubs to get people involved, is that they have a club open day where people come down, and you are invited down, and people can see the club in action, and it's a great way to actually get people to join the club, and also perhaps to get more involved than just joining it. I'll link the Club Open Day with the mass communication and online in a moment. The registration day is definitely a great opportunity to get parents involved, and I'll just give you an example that some clubs have at the start of their coaching season, whether it's the end of February or early March or whenever it is, that they have a registration day where parents come down and they have to fill out the forms. Now, there are very few days that you'll get so many parents into your club, so it's important that you make the most of this opportunity. And what I've seen clubs doing is rather than having a sort of a, on the registration form, would you be interested in getting involved or helping out in the club, to be more specific, that you would actually ask, can you give 1 hour per week to the club? We are looking for help in the following areas. And listed underneath then would be coaching. It could be helping with the club website, organising parking before the coaching mornings. That you need to be specific, that people know exactly what they're volunteering for. And clubs find that when you're specific like this, that parents will look and say, well, I could give a hand out with the refreshments before the local, we'll say the weekly bingo night that might be taking place in the club. So to actually not to be general and say, would you be willing to help out with the club, but to actually have a sort of a checkbox that parents could actually, you might have a parent who is very much into IT and will be quite happy to help out with the club website, updating it, rather than getting involved in coaching because they can't give it the time. So registration day is an important day to get your parents on board. Mass communication, that's where, that can take different, we link it with the online there too, that you might have a note in the parish bulletin that your registration day is coming up, or that your club open day is coming up, or a piece in the paper, the local paper about it. And then we'll say the online platforms as well, that you would advertise it there. The notes with the players is when your coaching season is up and running, that notes going home with players is a good way to get that request home to the parents. And again, it's important how that note is actually phrased and prepared, that you need to, and we'll be coming to it, a kind of task identification. You need to sit down as a club and see what are the areas that we really need extra help and support in, what would ease the burden on others. Okay, so the one thing that the club open day and the registration day have in common, and where they're different to the mass communication notes with players and online, leads me into my next point here, that nothing can replace face-to-face or the personal contact. Again, if I was to ask you just to reflect for a moment on how you got involved in, and not just, we'll say, your handball club, but maybe other things that you're volunteering in, it was probably through someone picking up the phone to you to ask you, would you go on the committee? Would you consider going on the committee? Or would you give a handout with the group that's coaching the under 12s for the coming year? That no, it may have been that you got a flyer home from the club and then you made contact. But I think for a lot of us, I know for myself, that for the different things that I have been involved in over the years, that a lot of them have been where someone has kind of picked up the phone or called to the house, or we'll say where you've met down in the club and they've said, would you be able to give a handout with something in particular? So you cannot underestimate the importance of the personal contact, and that does add work to a committee, but it's, as we'll see shortly, it's worth it. Now, I know there's a lot of text on this screen, but it was hard to leave out some of the points here. That just a suggestion here, that each recruitment drive should begin with the most basic unit of voluntary commitment, which is 1 hour per week. And, it might seem a recruitment drive, but if you really want, as a committee, to get more people involved in the running of the club, whatever aspect of the running of the club, it needs to be organised. It needs to be, you need to sit down as a committee, and we could call it sort of a task identification. In other words, for each club, you need to say, well, where are we struggling a bit at the moment with help? And these are just examples of tasks. They're not every club will have its own tasks. I know weekend underage coaching is common to a lot of clubs. Selling lotto tickets, very important for, I suppose, the club operating from month to month. Depending on your size of club, you may have a clubhouse or a social club, putting out chairs for club function, washing jerseys for one team. Okay, this putting out flags before a match, updating the club website, assisting with the club shop or club merchandise. And, you know, when you look at those, these tasks, they could be described as straightforward and easy to do. And somebody is probably doing them already. So you can imagine if they're taking off the workload of an already under pressure volunteer, it can make a great difference to the running of a club. And it goes back to my previous slide there, the point I made about being specific with what you're asking, rather than if it's parents we're targeting, that we're not saying, would you be willing to give a handout in the club? That instead of that, you're saying, would you be willing to give 1 hour a week to help with one of the following? And you know, parents will have a look and they'll say, yeah, I could give a handout there 1 hour a week. I can manage that. That's not too bad. That's not too much of an ask. So when we do get people on board, it's important, that's only part one of the job done, that you need to reassure them that there is support for them, that you will help them. And it goes back to why people sometimes don't volunteer, is that that they lack a bit of confidence. They think that they don't have the skills to do the job. And it's not enough for us to say to someone, you know, you'll be grand, you know, it'll be fine, you'll get on with it fine, whether it's if they've taken up a role on the committee or with coaching, that it is important that we develop our volunteers and give them opportunities to develop. So on this screen here, we've just a few resources. Owen spoke last week about the club leadership development program and the different range of courses that are available for current officers, but also for people who might be thinking of getting involved in the administrative side of the club. There's the GA Learning, a website that I'd recommend to you, and Owen touched on it last week, is learning.gaa.ie. And if you go to the administrator section of that portal, there's a tab with club resources, and underneath that then there's another section for club officers learning files. So there's a library of resources there in the learning.ga.ie. The club planning program that's been rolled out by a different committee is a great way for getting people involved, and there's training comes with that too in terms of what role they take on. The phone and the little book there, well, the phone support you can give people to is by keeping in touch with them. Like if someone takes over a role on the committee or gets involved, you've asked them to get involved in something, just to be there to lend them support, and that they know that if they have any questions or they want to run something by you, that you are there at the end of the phone. This is an interesting piece here, that holding on to our volunteers, there's a framework here called the 6 R's of participation, and I'm just going to just go through them quickly there for you. We've touched on some of them already there, that if we start there at the top with relationship, that you know, that it usually starts when someone gets involved in a club. You have probably made contact with them, whether it's a phone call or you've called to them. So, it's important there that that relationship is maintained and that people feel very welcome when they do join the club, like when they actually are asked to get involved, that there is that warm welcome is ongoing. The role is very important in that we need to provide a clear role description for every volunteer, and to check regularly that people haven't been overloaded or overburdened. And, that when people are, we'll say, assigned or allocated a task or a role, that we don't forget about them, that we keep providing feedback to them. And we know ourselves that we like to get affirmation, especially if we get involved in something new. Isn't it nice that someone passes a comment, do you know what, you've settled into that job great, or you're doing great work there, how are you getting on, it looks like you're enjoying it. Comments like that to our volunteers are very important, because no matter what age we are, we all like some reassurance. Variety is important too, just in terms of the role, that we give people an opportunity to get involved in different aspects of the running of the club, that nobody is left in the same place or the same role for too long. Now, you might say that some people are quite happy to stay in the same role, but it's just to be mindful of that as a committee, that sometimes people might like nothing like a change to re-energize us. Recognition, I've touched on that there, that we constantly acknowledge volunteers, both formally and informally. We tell them that they've done a good job. Sometimes we're slow to actually give recognition. We might think, should they know we appreciate them? But if we pause and think, well, when was the last time somebody told them that they were doing a good job? So for most people, a simple thank you is all that is required. And if there are any club secretaries here tonight, that I think it's important that in your AGM report, that it is a good opportunity to acknowledge and name volunteers, that if it's something related to pitch development or coaching or the lotto committee or whatever it is, that they are named. It's a good opportunity. The secretary's report at the end of the year, or in the weekly club notes, that if something happens, something positive happens, that people are named, the people that were involved. And it's things like that. Now, for some people, they don't pass any remarks, but for a lot of people, they do like affirmation and a little bit of thanks. Respect, that people want to feel that their values, ideas and time is respected and considered in the club. That if people do have suggestions, it's not possible to take everybody's suggestions or ideas on board, but that nobody would be dismissive of somebody's ideas. And so respect is, no matter what walk of life we're in, whether it's sporting or day-to-day, that respect for everybody is so important. The results, I touched on that we're not talking here about county titles. We're talking about results where work that there's evidence of progress. We say people that have got involved in a project or a committee, that the volunteers can see that this is having a positive impact on the life of the club or the structure of the club. So and they can see that there is kind of visible, the visible impact of their work. And finally, then reward, that generally people that when they volunteer, they're not looking for any reward, but that doesn't mean that we just kind of rule it out. It can vary. I've heard of clubs that have volunteer nights where the volunteers are invited in for a cup of tea, sandwich, bun into the club, and it's actually a nice social evening too, because sometimes volunteers operate in little hubs that you have your and they don't cross paths with each other. Like it could be coaching, that there are different times for coaching, or we'll say the people who volunteer to help out with we'll say the lotto night, like they'll never bump into possibly the people that are involved in the coaching side of things. So it is nice to have perhaps you know, an annual volunteer evening or volunteer night, just to, or a day to set aside and appreciate the effort of your volunteers. So there's the 6 R's. If I was to pick 2, well, pick 3, yes, but they're all important, but I think the role, the recognition and respect are very important. Be specific with the role, and because it's very hard to, you know, if you're set out the role and you say to somebody, look, we're only looking for 1 hour per week, it's hard for someone to refuse you. So with the R's, that what the R's result in is that people stay involved. And it's important again to look at the, if you want to call it the theory aspect of it. Why do people stay involved in clubs? They stay involved because they feel valued. They feel their contribution is respected. They feel part of the group and do not feel excluded from decision making. And they feel a sense of pride that they have contributed to the club. What the R's prevent is burnout. And again, to look at the factors that contribute to burnout is a club that's lacking in goals and direction, too much work to be done, few rewards or recognition for a job well done, too few people involved, over criticism, large fundraising responsibilities. That's a big turn off for people that, you know, they've been asked to get involved, and you know, the first task is to go on a committee where fundraising is the main. Now, some people may like that, but it's not the first role that you would be giving to somebody that has volunteered to get involved. And then the last one there, the role was not what they expected when they signed on. So again, the importance of being very clear about the role. So it's a bit small, the print, but just to look at 10 top tips for recruiting and retaining volunteers, and we've touched on these already. People are waiting to be asked, so ask them. Older people are the most willing volunteers, involve them. Think beyond the inner circle and to end the clique. You know, you don't want a club where they're cliques. Link tasks with available skills and use wisely. And that goes back to my point about that if you do a sort of a flyer, that you know, be specific, write down the areas that, and you might get somebody, for the example I mentioned earlier, that is very much into IT and who would be delighted to, we'll say, update and maintain the club website or the online, we'll say, whether it's the Twitter or Facebook or whatever online presence your club has. Begin with an agreed volunteer commitment, 1 hour. Affirmation, praise and reward. You're talking about giving rewards. Affirmation doesn't cost anything. Use your club database to recruit and inform. The importance of communication, that you know, that to keep members informed of good things that are happening in the club, the positive initiatives, and that's that kind of, energizes people and encourages them to keep, gives everybody a boost. Use the task identification idea to give people a focused and time-bound commitment. Teamwork counts. Like, we're going back to the 1 hour commitment there. And if you just think about it, if you even got 10 dozen people extra involved in the workings of your club, that's 12 hours a week. Have plans for recently retired players and coaches that to keep those players involved. And I didn't mention it earlier, but even current players should be involved, should volunteer to get involved with possibly the coaching, because younger players, they look up to we'll say older players, established players, and it's great if they can give something. If they can give something back before they finish up playing, it's great that current players, they have a role to play too. And then finally, avail of the GAA's own President's Awards scheme to recommend people to your county committee who have given dedicated service to your club over a long period, and that's the recognition aspect again. So, just in conclusion there, that's what we set out at the start with, and I'm just going to flick on then to some of the questions that came in during the week. And again, I'm only offering an opinion rather than an answer. And we've touched on some of these already. How can you build a volunteer's confidence to undertake a role you know they are more than capable of? It's a good question. I think to be clear on what is expected, and that, if you're talking to somebody and trying to get them involved, that you need to be specific, and also not to set the bar too high. That you reassure someone and say, look, start off with realistic short-term targets. Also to outline the support that's available. Like, if somebody has got involved in taking on one of the principal officer roles in the club, that you would say, look, the club leadership development program have courses. The learning.ga.ie has actually outline of role of officers, and also the phone contact, the phone support, that to reassure the person that there will be support from the outgoing committee. To keep in touch as well, that a volunteer doesn't feel that, well, I'm on my own now, that I have to get going and keep at it. That keep in touch, and again, the recognize and affirm progress. That you regularly say to someone, how are you getting on, and you've made great progress already. You're doing great work. So some of the points we've mentioned, they're intertwined there, been specific, affirming, keeping in touch. How is it best to approach new volunteers? Well, we've mentioned that already, that personal contact. Now, this one I didn't mention earlier was a general meeting for people interested in getting involved. This is a good suggestion, especially if you're looking for more people to get involved in the coaching side of things. That if you kind of look on, that your registration has been very good, and you are thinking we could be under a bit of pressure now for people to help out, that it's no harm to actually call a meeting of parents of maybe a particular age group, and to outline to them, what you will be providing for their children, and that really you could do with extra help. Because sometimes, and it comes up in one of the further questions, parents and ordinary members sometimes aren't aware of the workload that's involved in the running of a club. And something like a general meeting can create that awareness. Other than training, what keeps volunteers engaged with a club? Should there be a social events organised, and if so, what form should these take and what works best? What keeps people involved? Again, recognition and praise, respect, results, again, that they can see the positive effect that their work is having, a variety, that they have an opportunity if they want to get involved in some other role as well. We mentioned the volunteer night. Like, what form should a social event take? That really is up to your own club. I know I mentioned there a couple, like we'll say when coaching is finishing up for the year, that if it's on a Saturday, like we'll say when it finishes up on the Saturday afternoon, that cup of tea, sandwich, cake, whatever, just an opportunity to for people to chat and to chat about the year that has gone by. And again, to mention then in Secretary's report at the AGM, like, you know, if we think of ourselves, some of you are probably involved in your club maybe a good while, or if you're involved in something else a good while, probably the reason you've stayed involved is that you enjoy it. So it's important that volunteers enjoy being involved in a club, that it doesn't become a chore. Okay. This one here was this is a very good question. Volunteer coaches is the hardest slot to fill in handball. People cite lack of handball experience. How can we get over this? They cite lack of football and hurling experience as well. So what I would suggest here is that what I've seen work in clubs is where you know, someone who might say, as you'd say, they say, oh, I don't know anything about handball, but that you pair a new coach with an experienced coach. That in a lot of clubs, you don't have even, we'll say, a small number, if possible, involved with a particular team or with a particular group. That, you know, it's hard to get somebody involved if they think that they're going to have to take the group and lead the coaching on it. So a good way to get, we'll say, new coaches involved is to actually, you know, say to them, look, the under 10s have coaching there on a Saturday morning. They have 4 or 5 coaches there, but we could do with an extra 1 or 2. Drop down and you know, the experienced coaches then, they just involve the new person in a very kind of, it's sort of a gentle introduction, like a mentoring really. Now, of course, the undertaking a coaching, an organized coaching program is would be ideal, but sometimes that can be hard to get up and running. So whereas pairing or having a sort of a mentoring system, I think I've seen it work with football coaching. And do you know, it sort of demystifies it for some people that, you know, they come down and when they sort of have that safety net of 4 or 5 other coaches there, that they feel, yeah, I can, you know, I can help out here, whether it's just standing, helping out with a particular drill or keeping an eye on a group that's working over here in a particular skill, that the mentoring system does work. The same people do most of the volunteering every year. It's not a massive amount of work, but a few ideas on how to involve new people would be welcome. It's a bit like what I mentioned there in the previous question about involving new people alongside the seasonal volunteers, that with the new people, you don't want to overburden them, but if they can work in tandem with the people who are there every year, that is a challenge. And it's, as I said, involving new people with a group of people that are there already, I find is, you know, it's a good way of easing the burden. This question is is a bit like the getting the parents involved in the coaching. As a committee, you need to identify the areas you need help in. And when you've done that, then to call a meeting of the parents and to outline what you'll be providing for the children and how extra help would have such a positive impact. And again, you're going back to the 1 hour a week commitment. And do you know, parents often don't realize the effort and work that's involved in the club, whether it's in the coaching side of it or in the, we'll say, the financial challenges that a club have. And you need to tell them. And the thing about it is, parents generally, I know at annual general meetings that the reports for the different areas are presented, but perhaps not too many parents come to an annual general meeting. So it's no harm at the outset of your coaching year that, you know, you set out your coaching program, what you plan to do. And you might say, we currently have maybe 24 under 14s or whatever, and we currently have 3 or 4 coaches. So we really need extra help there. And, you know, some parents might think, my goodness, you know, they're doing great work. I can give an hour, not every week, I can give an hour every 2 weeks. So I think don't assume that parents and members know what's involved, you know, if you're involved in the committee, you know exactly what the workload is. But sometimes you need to spread that word and communicate to the members and to parents all that's involved. And you'd be surprised that you will get them on board, whether it's in terms of actually coming down and helping out at with the coaching, or whether it's that they'll say, well, look, I'm not available to coach, but I will definitely take a book of lotto tickets a week or whatever. One last thing that I meant to mention earlier there, just in terms of getting parents involved too, I know in our own club there that one of our, we'll say, minor board or underage committee, that he will, you know, on the morning of coaching, he will actually go around to the different areas, and he will you know, you sometimes have parents that drop their children and go, but you've many parents that stay around too. And he actually recruits quite a number of parents that way, that the personal contact again, that he goes around, and it's a sort of a soft approach, but he's determined actually to, you know, he kind of says to them, look, if you're staying around here for the hour, why don't you get involved? And so it's a good way of recruiting people too. So that's, I'm just looking at my watch here, and I've gone way over time, and I'm going to pass you over to, I haven't seen any questions popping up because I've been on the screen for the presentation. So John, I'm going to pass it over to you there, John.
No problem, Oliver. Thanks a million. It might have been over time, but I think everyone would agree it was a very informative and excellent presentation. So thanks very much for that, Oliver. A lot of good stuff there, guys, and a lot of stuff that, you know, I suppose we might have already known, but it's good to get reinforced that it's not necessarily anything we're doing wrong, but just mainly a few things we might need to tweak. And I suppose some of the key things I would feel is, you know, the encouragement, Oliver mentioned as well there about cliques, and oftentimes there is cliques in clubs, in be it football, be it hurling, be it handball, whatever. But there's an attitude that if you're not a handballer, you won't make a good volunteer in a handball club. Oftentimes the best volunteers are not skilled in the actual sport, so the best volunteers in handball might never be handballers, sorry. And you know, we already see that in a lot of our clubs. Some of the very good club secretaries, some of the very good club chair people, they're not actually handballers. And it's an important point to make that we don't have to have all handballers in a handball club to make it work harmoniously. That people can bring different skills to a club, such as, you know, organisational skills, administrative skills. So we have a couple of questions in there from John Lyne, so I'll just give you these, Oliver, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
It said, when asked, parents and GAA juvenile coaches just didn't want to hear because they're so busy with kids' involvements in so many things. So I suppose that's a case of a club asking for help, but people are saying they're too busy. So you probably have covered that in a way, but if you have anything you'd like to add to that.
Yeah, it's yeah, that is a challenge for a lot of clubs, and I think sometimes you have to lay the facts bare for parents that, look, we're providing this for, we want to provide the best coaching for your child or children, and the best way to do that is by having as many adults there helping out with the coaching session. And you know, this it mightn't, I was mentioned there, the 1 hour per week, but even if they can't do that, you know, surely someone can give you an hour every second or third week. You know, I'm just looking at the second part of it there, John. Secondly, when we get them in to try handball and to see others with their rackets, well, the racket game takes preference. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Is that we'll say in the alleys they'll be there with their rackets playing, or that's
some handball alleys would have like racquetball in them as well. You know, kind of.
Okay. Yeah. I wouldn't have an answer for that one now.
I suppose the way I would address that would be that you need to look at what you're doing, I suppose, in the handball court and make it as enjoyable as possible. Sometimes people will just choose a different sport. There's nothing we can do about that. But there is, if we make our sport as attractive as possible, as enjoyable as possible, then word of mouth will spread, and hopefully they'll drop the racket and come back to handball. So it's about promoting our sport a bit, and, you know, having a confidence in our sport as well, that it's not just a case of, well, you know, they're leaving for other sports, so we let them. We need to try and get those people back by, I suppose, by promoting the club and by creating informative and entertaining training sessions that kids will go into school and they'll say to them, oh, we had this training session at handball the other day, it was brilliant, we played this game, we did this, you know? Yeah,
definitely. And as you said, John, you are, you know, there's always a natural fall off to, you know, that children will try different things, and then they'll gravitate towards something, you know.
Yeah, it's important with kids as well to create that good word of mouth, because generally kids will follow what other kids do, and, you know, if we can create a nice, happy environment for them and an enjoyable environment for them, well, then, you know, that's all we can really do as coaches and as volunteers. And, you know, sometimes they won't come to our sport. Sometimes they just are more attracted to other sports, and, you know, that's something that we have to accept. But other times, you know, we might just be missing a trick in terms of racquetball might be doing something innovative that we're not doing, and we can learn from these sports and what they're doing as well, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that's it, Oliver. I think that's all the questions we got. Guys, just want to say again a huge thank you to Oliver. I know there's a comment there. It's a very informative and professionally delivered presentation, and the couple of times I've been involved with Oliver, his presentations are second to none. They're informative, they're excellent, and the content is really, really relevant to ourselves in handball and across the wider GAA. Sometimes with presentations where people aren't familiar with handball, they can be very much geared towards other sports, but this is very, very relevant, I think, and all that was said tonight can be applied to a handball club, which is excellent. I hope you found it informative. I hope you've taken at least some little nugget that you can go back to your clubs and develop, and hopefully attract new volunteers. We will keep in touch with Oliver, and we will, you know, we'll stay in touch with him. And if you have any queries down the line, get them into us. We'll ask Oliver, we'll ask the committee, you know, and we'll share that knowledge, and we'll get back to you, and hopefully, you know, make things easier on the road ahead. But for the moment, I want to just say a huge thanks to Oliver. Again, very informative, very excellent presentation, and thanks again, Oliver, for your contribution.
And John, thanks very much. And I was delighted. It goes back to delighted to be asked. And that's, as I said, it's my second involvement with the handball, and they've been two very positive experiences. So thanks very much, John. And look, and thanks to everyone who tuned in this evening. And look, stay safe over the coming months. Thanks very much, John.
Thanks very much, Oliver. Okay, folks, so I suppose from our point of view, we keep moving forward, and next week's webinar is in a very important area in all our clubs, in finance. So the webinar will be delivered by Joan Kelly, who's the financial controller for the GAA, and Joan will be looking at the finances for clubs, and she'll explain the best practices for monetary dealings for clubs. So it's a very important one for all our clubs, very important one for governance and clubs to be up to speed with the financial regularities in today's world. So tomorrow, Park will send out a Microsoft form to register for webinar 3, and hopefully, we can big up the numbers, spread the word, and get even better numbers for next week again. But for the moment, thanks for tuning in tonight. We hope you found it informative. We'll keep going. We'll hopefully see you again next week for webinar number 3. And in the meantime, thanks again for attending. Please stay safe.